The gunfire came at dawn. I was in the town square with Sheriff Coleman when the first volley tore through the mercantile windows, screaming, the sound of horses, the terrible sound of violence with nowhere to hide. "Get to the church!" Coleman shouted, and I moved with the panic, my boots slipping in the dust. But then I saw her. Sarah McKinnon stood on the church steps perfectly still while chaos erupted around her, not hiding, not running, waiting. And when the riders came round the corner, 20 of them, maybe 30, faces painted with war paint and righteousness, they saw her, and something happened that I'll never understand. They stopped. Every single one of them, as though an invisible line had been drawn. The leader, a man named Cassidy, with a scarred face and the eyes of someone who'd forgotten how to be human. He looked at Sarah, and his gun hand trembled. "You did this," he screamed at her. "You warned them. You chose them over us." Sarah didn't move, didn't defend herself, just looked at him with an expression of such profound sorrow that the entire moment fractured. Then she ran, and Cassidy followed, and I understood, in that frozen second, that everything I thought I knew about that woman was wrong. But before this moment shattered everything, the story goes, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 weeks before the massacre, I was clerk at the general store in Redemption Falls, a town so small it barely qualified as a town. Maybe 300 people. We had a sheriff, a church, a saloon, and dreams that never came true. My name was Thomas Weaver. I was 32 years old and had never left that county. I'd never been in love. I'd never done anything remarkable in my entire life. I was taking inventory of dry goods when she walked in. Sarah McKinnon was striking in a way that made you uncomfortable looking at her. Not beautiful exactly, but present. The kind of woman who makes a room smaller by being in it. She wore a man's coat, weather-stained and travel-worn. Her hands were scarred. Her eyes were older than her face. "I need supplies, ammunition, good rope, and a map of the territories north of here." "You heading out?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She said, "I'm running from something, and I need to stay ahead of it." She paid in gold coin, more money than I had ever seen in one place, and left as quietly as she had come. I watched her walk to the boarding house, and I remember thinking, that woman is either running toward something or away from everything. I didn't know it was both. Over the next weeks, Sarah became a ghost that everyone saw but nobody could keep hold of. She'd eat at the saloon, then disappear into the hills for 2 days. She'd buy supplies, then trade them away. She seemed to be constantly preparing to leave, but she never actually left. I started paying attention, not out of official business, but because something about her stillness drew me in. I found myself making excuses to encounter her. "Good morning, Miss McKinnon. How are you finding Redemption Falls?" She'd answer politely, but distantly, like she was speaking to me from very far away. Then one evening, she came to the store after closing. I let her in because I couldn't think of a reason not to. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked, looking at the shelves of inventory like they were barriers. "Every day," I admitted, "but I never do." "That's the saddest thing I've heard. Wanting to leave, but staying anyway." "Why do you stay?" I asked. "You're not like the people here. You don't belong." She looked at me for a long moment. I'm staying because I'm trying to stop something, and I'm failing, and soon I'm going to have to choose between running and standing." Before I could ask what she meant, she left. The next morning, I heard the rumors. People were saying Sarah had been spotted north of town talking with Cassidy's gang, the raiders who'd been terrorizing the territories for 2 years. They'd killed settlers, robbed trains, burned out smaller towns. "She's one of them," the sheriff said over whiskey at the saloon. I didn't believe it, but I also couldn't explain her presence, her strange supplies, and the way she watched the roads like she was waiting for something terrible. "She came to my store at midnight. I heard the knock and found her on the other side of the door. Dust in her hair, urgency in her movements. 'They're coming,' she said. 'Cassidy's men, tomorrow at dawn. They're going to burn the town, take supplies, maybe worse.' 'How do you know?' 'Because I was part of it,' she said, and the words fell like stones between us. 'I rode with them for 5 years. I did things I'll spend eternity trying to undo, and they decided to come here. They decided tonight was the night. Then we stop them. We evacuate. You can't stop them,' she interrupted. 'They're 20 men led by a murderer. All you can do is warn people and hope they run fast enough.' 'Why are you telling me this? Why are you helping us?' Sarah's face broke then, just for a moment, like a mirror cracking. 'Cause I have to,' she whispered. 'Because I made a choice 5 years ago to become someone who kills, and I can't make that unchosen. But I can try to save one town, one place. I can prove that I'm not just the monster they made me.' 'Who made you?' I asked. She turned away. 'My father, the man who raised me in blood and taught me that mercy was weakness, the man I thought loved me until I realized what love meant to him. And when I couldn't do it anymore, when I couldn't kill anymore, I ran. And Cassidy found me, and he promised I could be more than broken. I could be useful. And now I'm choosing to be neither, but that choice costs.' She walked out into the darkness, and I ran to find the sheriff. By morning, we'd evacuated the families, sent them south toward the next county with whatever they could carry. We fortified the buildings. We prepared for a siege that seemed inevitable. What we didn't know was that Sarah had spent the night sending messages north to the cavalry station 3 days' ride away with details about Cassidy's location, his numbers, his intentions. She wasn't trying to save us. She was trying to end him. When the gunfire started, I understood everything at once. Sarah had orchestrated this. She'd alerted us so we could evacuate, minimizing civilian casualties, but she'd also ensured that Cassidy would come, that he'd come here, to this town at this exact time, where the cavalry was waiting to ambush him. She'd used us as bait. The fighting lasted 3 hours. When it was done, Cassidy's gang was decimated, the sheriff was wounded but alive, and Sarah was gone. Running again, disappearing into the hills as she always did. But the townspeople didn't see it that way. They saw that Sarah had been part of the gang, that she'd brought him here, that the violence, even though it ended in our survival, was her fault. She's a monster, they said. She got her people to attack us, they said. She deserves to hang. I stood in the square and listened to him condemn her for saving him, and I understood the cruelty of righteousness. They didn't want to believe that someone broken could choose to mend the things they had broken. They didn't want to live knowing that we'd been saved by a woman who was taught to kill and chose at the last moment to redirect that violence away from the innocent. It was easier to call her evil. It was simpler that way. She came back 6 months later.
I found her at the edge of town, waiting by the same store where she'd first walked in like a ghost. I had to know, she said, if anyone understood what I did. I understand, I said. You saved us, and we punished you for it. I killed people, Sarah replied. 5 men died in that fight. Men I knew, men I'd ridden with. I chose to betray them rather than let them slaughter innocents. That doesn't make me noble. That makes me someone who finally chose between 2 terrible things and picked the lesser evil. You were trying to undo what your father made you into. Yes, and I'm still trying, every day. I keep moving because staying means facing what I was, and I'm not strong enough for that yet. She looked at the town, at the buildings we'd rebuilt, at the lives that had continued, but I needed to know that at least one person saw the choice I made, that at least one person understood it wasn't redemption. It was just something less than damnation. What do you do now? I asked. Keep moving north. Keep trying to fix what I broke. Maybe I'll find a place where the broken things I fixed outnumber the broken things I created. Maybe that's as close to redemption as someone like me gets. She walked away, and I let her go. But I remember her not as the monster the town feared, but as a woman who understood that some choices are impossible. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is make an impossible choice and live with it. The frontier is full of people like Sarah. People who did terrible things because they were taught terrible things. People who tried to undo the damage and were condemned for it anyway. Sometimes saving people means sacrificing your own reputation. Sometimes it means being hated for the right reasons. That's the kind of mercy the frontier rarely offers, but it's the only kind that matters.
Redemption Falls never really recovered from that day. The families who'd evacuated didn't all come back. The town slowly emptied over the years, people moving somewhere else, somewhere that didn't hold the memory of violence and impossible choices. But I stayed. I kept the store. I kept it running, not for the people we had, but for the people like Sarah. The broken things passing through, looking for supplies or hope, or just a moment of kindness before they disappeared back into the wilderness. Sometimes on quiet nights, I think about what she said, about how you prove you're more than what you were made to be. The answer, I think, is this: you make different choices. Not perfect ones, just different. Just enough to mean something. Sarah taught me that the frontier doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. But occasionally, if you're very brave and very broken, it lets you choose a different kind of dying than the one you were born into. And sometimes, that's enough. Thank you for listening to this tale here on Frontier Love Tales. If this story of a woman trying to undo the violence she committed, if it reminded you that sometimes the people we fear most are the people trying hardest to change, then make sure you subscribe. Because out here on the frontier, every sunset hides another story waiting to be told. Stories of impossible choices. Stories of people trying to become more than what they were made to be. Stories of the kind of courage that looks like betrayal, but tastes like mercy. Subscribe, because these stories matter.